Hello, and welcome back to Happy Hour. I'm Alex, and this is my great friend, Dory. Dory, I am so glad that you're here with me today. I was sitting around the table the other day with a few friends of mine, drinking wine and waxing poetically as I tend to do.
Just a touch.
Picking apart the wine that we were drinking, and my friend said, "How do you do that? How do you know what to say? How do you know what you're smelling? How do you know what you're tasting?" And I said, "You know, you've come to the right place." Why? Because I know Dory, and she knows everything.
Don't let him kid you. Alex here is a certified somm, so he probably gets asked this question a lot. But what we plan on doing today is kind of walking you through the basic steps on how to taste wine. Because when you're tasting wine, there's a lot of complex flavors and sensations on your tongue, but you don't necessarily know how to identify those things. But first of all, it takes a lot of practice, as Alex and myself know. Mm-hmm. But what you're really kind of looking for is essentially like 3 standard things. You want to visually assess the wine, so color, cloudiness, effervescence. You want to smell the wine, and that's where you're going to get all the aromatics, which tend to translate on the palate as well as flavors. And then on the palate itself, you're really looking for sweetness, sensations of acidity. If it's a red wine, it'll be tannin, how round it feels in your mouth. And essentially, you can evaluate the quality of the wine based on how those proponents interact with one another. So if they're all in balance, I think it's a fair bet that you could say that's a very good quality wine.
Nice. So what you're telling me is that there is a structure.
There is a structure
to identifying wines through aromas and through taste. Great.
Systematically.
Perfect. I happen to have some beautiful wines here from Mandala Winery in Victoria, Australia. And how about we use these to run through that structure?
So a little bit first about the Mandala Winery. They're located in the Yarra Valley, which is just north of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. It tends to be a little cooler here versus other regions in Australia, and that's mostly due to elevation and also the proximity to the ocean, so they get a lot of cool ocean breezes as well. So oddly enough, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir grow really great there. And I don't think you always associate those 2 grapes with Australia.
No, I'm always thinking Cabernets or Shiraz, Shiraz or Syrah, depending on,
depending on who you ask, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, some of those bigger, bolder red grapes, for sure.
Yeah, these tend to be a little bit more on the delicate side, so they really like that cool climate of the Yarra. And this winery was founded by the Smedley family in the early 90s. And they're fairly new to the state of Vermont, so I figured what better 2 wines to taste, to demonstrate how to taste.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Great. So starting with a Chardonnay here, poured it into your glass and into mine. And
first thing we're going to do is check the color. So the best way to do this is to hold the glass at a 45-degree angle, and if you have something white handy, we have some papers in front of us, but it helps if you hold it over a white background. You want to look directly over the glass and into the color. So what color are you seeing, Alex?
I'm seeing like a, I don't know, kind of like a really, like a clear lemony color.
Yeah, it's a very, very pale yellow. It's very delicate looking. But
Thanks for the tip on holding it up against a white background. I was doing this at the beginning and couldn't see too much, but against the white background, it really becomes clear as to what you're looking at.
Yes.
Does that indicate anything? The color of being yellow as compared to, I've had some Sauvignon Blancs where they almost look like water, and I've had other Chardonnays where they look yellow.
Well, it has a lot to do with, first of all, the grape variety, how ripe the grapes are, also the winemaking process. If the wine has any age on it, a lot of older white wines will turn golden in color instead of being lemon in color. And also just, winemaking techniques that kind of extract more color out of the grapes.
Wow, you can learn a lot just from looking at it.
You can.
That's
you can also,
my least favorite part, though, just so you know. I love tasting it.
Yes, we'll get to that. You can also tell if there's any obvious faults, like if the wine is overly cloudy or if there's some unwanted effervescence in the wine as well.
Okay, awesome.
Right. That's step 1.
So where are we going to next?
Next, we're going to do what's actually my favorite part, because I feel like you get the really genuine character of the wine. We're going to check the aromas in the glass.
Love it.
So you want to get started with a swirl the glass. What this does is opens up the aromatics for you, and then you want to stick your nose directly in the glass as far as you can and take very short inhales.
And that's also a good test to make sure that you're not pouring too much wine into the
Yes.
glass. If you dip your nose in there and it gets wet, you might have a little bit too much wine in your glass.
If you can't swirl it, you're not going to smell it as well as you should.
Got it.
So what are you smelling, Alex?
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. I'm smelling a lot of lemon. I'm smelling a lot of ripe apple, both green and red apple. And I'm also picking up on some notes of vanilla, like some uses of wood, some oak in there.
Yes, me too. I'm touch hint of maybe some pear fruit. A little bit of spice too, like almost like a ginger or maybe like a nutmeg.
Yeah, no, I like that ginger call, most definitely.
Yeah,
it smells wonderful.
It does.
It's really reminding me right off of the bat of some really beautiful Burgundy wines that I've had. And Burgundy, just for the viewers at home, also work with Chardonnay for their whites and Pinot Noir for their reds. And I did know that we were doing the Mandala wines, and when I looked them up, a little bit of information that really struck me was the winemaker, Charles, has a love for Burgundy wines, and so that's kind of what led them down to the Yarra Valley. He wanted a location where he could make wines in Australia, but in this Burgundian style.
Oh, it's lovely.
It is wonderful.
And now for Alex's favorite part, let's taste it.
Let's
taste it. So there's certain things you should be looking for when you're tasting. First of all, do you have any sweetness in this wine?
There's just a touch of sweetness. I know it's a dry wine, but there's a nice ripeness of fruit that can be a little complicated sometimes. Sometimes people, when I'm doing classes or whatnot, say, oh, that's a really sweet wine. And there's a difference between sugary sweet or just a nice, ripe, fruity wine. Yeah. And there's plenty of fruity expression here, but it's not sugary sweet in any way.
Oh, that's lovely. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is, what's the acidity of this wine, do you think?
So acidity is a tricky one.
It is.
And because acidity isn't so much a flavor, but it is a sensation. And the way that I like to let people know if you're experiencing acidity is that mouth-watering quality.
Ah, yes.
And this, I would say, is about a medium plus acidity. It's definitely there. It's definitely refreshing and makes my mouth water, but not drooling in any way. So medium plus, I'd say.
And that's fairly typical for Chardonnay. Yeah. But the best way to indicate acidity, as Alex was mentioning, mouth-watering, is you take a sip of the wine, and then you swallow the wine, and then you leave your mouth open. And if your mouth immediately starts to water, that's an indicator of high acidity.
Yeah. Oh, this is excellent.
Yes. What do you think about the body of this wine, Alex?
It's got a nice full body. Usually in Chardonnays, that's what you're going to find. Winemakers around the world love Chardonnay for its malleability. Basically, it expresses a lot of the terroir where it's grown and the winemaking styles, but also because of that weight, it has a nice full body for white wines.
This is very rich. I think a lot of the times, like people, they think of white wines, they think of very like light, but like good Chardonnay, they have a very distinctive weight to them, very like round mouthfeel.
They're really great to drink on their own, but they're also lovely to pair with a lot of different dishes. They really hold up and hold their own.
I think this wine is very well balanced. What do you think, Alex? All the components seem to fit very nicely together. I'm getting a lot of the similar flavors that we smelled on the nose in the palate itself.
I agree with you 100%.
So definitely some citrus fruit for sure, and some apple. Definitely the oak for sure. I would say overall, this is a very good quality wine.
I would say it's a high quality wine,
Great.
most definitely. Surprising because of where it's coming from? Not anymore. Now we know beautiful, wonderful wines are coming out of South Australia and the Victoria region in particular.
Well, I'm really excited to try this Pinot Noir. Oh, look at that color already.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's very light.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so we're going to go through the process again, because as we discussed earlier, practice makes perfect.
So we start just by visually assessing the wine, holding it up against that white background. Here's one little tidbit, a little trick, if you will, that I like to let everybody know when we're doing classes or trainings. with a red wine in particular, if you hold it up to that white piece of paper and there happens to be some writing on the paper, if you can read through it, that's going to indicate that it's a lighter bodied wine. Like a Pinot Noir,
Yes.
you should usually be able to read right through it.
I can read everything through that.
I could
right?
read it crystal clear. This is really light color.
Yeah.
But if it was a Cabernet or a Shiraz, for instance, something that's a bolder red, it's going to be inkier, it's going to be a fuller bodied wine, and there's no way you're reading through that.
No. And often, too, with the deeper color wines, you wouldn't be able to see the stem of your glass. That is another test that you can do if you don't have a piece of paper handy.
Good tip.
Yeah.
I like that.
All right, into the aromas. Put your nose right in there, Alex.
Yeah.
Right
Wow,
off the
there's
bat.
so much going on.
There's a lot. I'm getting like a big burst of like flowers and like ripe red cherry and a little bit of oak for sure. Touch of vanilla on that, just very subtle.
To me, it's hitting like a very classic, well-made Pinot Noir. You get your cranberry, you get that bright cherry, a little bit of that mushroomy forest floor, if you will.
Oh, yeah, that's really nice.
And definitely the use of oak, which in this instance, it translates as really beautiful baking spice. So your nutmeg and your cinnamon and whatnot. A little hit of vanilla.
It doesn't overpower the fruit at all. It complements it very nicely, I think. Yeah, that's lovely.
Let's move on to the good part.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
All right. Well,
What are
first
you
of all,
getting?
that's delicious.
That is delicious wine.
That's delicious. But we'll kind of start with the acidity since we're going through our structure. So I'm definitely getting kind of like a medium acidity on that. Something new, it's definitely dry for sure. Even though it has a lot of fruit, I'm getting more of a dry finish on this wine than I was from the Chardonnay. That could also be because of the tannins. Don't you think, Alex? That's one thing we didn't talk about with the white wines, did we?
What are these tannins you speak of, Dory?
So one thing that you'll notice on the palate for red wine versus white wine, some white wines, but that's a long story. We won't go down that road. But with red wines, you'll get this sensation in your palate from the tannins. And what that is, it's kind of the opposite of acidity, where the acidity makes your mouth water. The tannins dry your mouth out. So it can be a little bit confusing sometimes with red wines because the acidity and the tannins are kind of balancing each other out. So what do you think of the level of acidity in this wine, Alex?
I'm going to agree with you in your initial assessment. It's right down the middle. Middle of the road acidity. It's just right. It doesn't feel flabby, which means a lack of acidity. It's still nice and tight and well structured, but it's not making my mouth water overtly in any means. But you're right, the tannins on there are nice and mellow.
Very smooth.
Very smooth. They're not drying out my mouth too much.
No, it's really light in the back of my teeth. Which is another good place to feel the tannins, if you will.
Yeah, and tannins, like acidity, are not a flavor component. They are a tactile sensation. If you still can't wrap your head around tannins, if you're a tea drinker, you've experienced tannins. Tea has a lot of tannins. It can make the back of your lip stick to the front of your top teeth sometimes, and that's a tannic sensation.
How about the body, Alex?
Nice and light, just like the color indicates. Lots of power, really expressive. It's not a flimsy wine by any means, which indicates its quality level. It gives you so much while still being really light on its feet.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful wine.
One thing that I'm noticing, even though it is very light-bodied, is like the flavor complexity. Like there's just layers and layers of different flavors on the palate, which match up pretty closely to, I think, what we were smelling in the glass.
Most definitely, yeah. These aren't tricky wines in any way.
No.
What you're smelling translates really nicely to what you're tasting, and it's just all put together in this really beautiful structured package.
Yeah. What do we think about quality? Are they
I think I might have
balanced?
said it once or twice. I think the balance is fantastic and the quality in these is exceptional.
So when we're tasting wine and we're systematically tasting wine, we're looking for a lot of different things, I think it's fair to say, but they all say something very significant about the wine itself, about, the wine making, and also about the quality.
100%. Thank you so much for taking us through that systematic tasting. And now I have something to tell all my friends. Instead of just going on and on and on, I could say what you're seeing, what you're smelling, and then what you're tasting, and then that overall package, how it all kind of ties together. But remember, at the end of the day, wine is very personal. So I might like it, you might not. It doesn't matter. If it makes you happy, you picked
Go
the
with
right
it.
one.
Thank you.
Cheers.